What it is, cucks, it's your boy the Hater. And, as part of this Hater reboot, we're definitely going to do a roster review. So I figured, why not do a roster preview and just discuss the general shortcomings of the WWE roster. First of all, like I said yesterday, number one, the WWE roster is being slowly replaced by TNA jobbers. This is something that is a recurring problem, right? Instead of creating new stars, like was the norm back in the day, the people you would see in WWE or WWF, or even in WCW for the large part, were people that were going to be made into stars by those companies themselves, right? Now, and, for the last 15, 20 years, basically since Batista and Cena, like the new norm is just sign people that, you then try to make into stars. And this has led to a completely disastrous roster filled with mid-carders. You understand me? Now, there's wrestlers out there, like Sami Zayn, who, at any given point in Sami Zayn's career, if you looked at Sami Zayn, whether he was NXT Sami Zayn, or WWE Sami Zayn, or El Generico in ROH, it's like there was absolutely zero doubt that this guy at best is a mid-carder, right? I don't think anybody saw this guy ever and thought, wow, this guy's going to be a massive main eventer one day, right? Even when he was going after the NXT title, which he held for 3 weeks or 2 weeks or whatever, right? You saw him and you're like, okay, this is one of those guys, like the vast majority of NXT champions, that become NXT champions and then end up in the main roster where they become mid-card jobbers, right? And that's exactly what he's been. Even though he's a multiple-time mid-card champion, 2 WrestleManias ago, this last WrestleMania, I should say, his entire storyline was, is he good enough to be a mid-card champion? That's pretty much every storyline of Sami Zayn, is the fans being forced to ask the question of, is Sami Zayn good enough to do whatever the hell he's trying to do? Whether that's become the NXT champion, which is basically the same thing as being European champion and put on the same caliber, or, being Intercontinental champion, which is a slight step up from NXT champion. The question for him is always wow, is he good enough to do this? Because the clear implication is that he's obviously not. So when he does do it, when he does achieve it, it's supposed to feel like this sort of big deal. You know what I mean? And quite frankly, I don't see why it would be considered a big deal at all, right? The reality is that we find ourselves in these situations where we have to ask ourselves the same questions again and again for this roster. I just saw some little interview of LA Knight, right? And it really shows the low-level goals that they have to have in kayfabe, because people like LA Knight know that they have their limits, right? So they asked, I forget who it was, but someone asked LA Knight, they're like, last year your goal was to win a championship and you won a championship. What's this year's goal? And then LA Knight says, this year's goal is to win back that championship. And it's and then he's like, oh, maybe I'll be a world champion, or maybe I'll be gone from this company. It's even the good wrestlers like LA Knight come off as insecure dorks, mostly out of necessity. But the reality is this roster is just so bad. So let's just run down the booking of some of the more prominent wrestlers. Let's start out with CM Punk, because he's the only one, for better or for worse, in my opinion, it's a horrible idea, but he's the only one that thus far this year has been presented as being some sort of main event type wrestler. Beyond him, everyone else is just a low-level, small-effort jobber, right? And CM Punk isn't that great either, but he's someone that's presented as a big deal, right? He's won all his matches, and everyone on the Raw roster feels like they're clearly beneath him, right? If you tune into Raw and CM Punk come in, let's say everyone that's important on Raw comes out. That would mean that Drew McIntyre, Seth Rollins, Gunther, maybe Damian Priest if you want to be generous, and CM Punk all come out, right? It's very clear that CM Punk stands head and shoulders above everyone else that I just mentioned. First of all, he just beat Seth Rollins, so that's not even close. Secondly, he completely humiliated Drew McIntyre for the vast majority of the year. Then you've got Gunther, who's been trading victories and losses against people better than him. You know what I mean? So he doesn't even count. So you have pretty much CM Punk as the only member of Raw that has any kind of validity, that has any kind of value. Like, he's had a good year. And on SmackDown, his counterpart, again, for better or for worse, it's Cody Rhodes. Cody Rhodes is effectively undefeated, and he's the champion. He doesn't feel like a champion, but that's it. Beyond that, it's like everyone else is just treated like complete garbage, you know? And it's not their fault largely, but the facts are the facts. You know, for better or for worse, if you're going to be booked this way, you're going to be treated this way by the fans as well, right? So it's like, if you really think about it, you know, does anybody here or anywhere really believe that Kevin Owens is going to be the next world champion? That he's going to dethrone Cody Rhodes? Does anyone actually believe that? Of course not. Nobody could possibly think that at all. Likewise, everybody knows that Jey Uso has no business beating Gunther for the title, despite the fact that Gunther is basically a mid-carder. He's basically a glorified mid-carder. Jey Uso is still not good enough, even though his name is Main Event Jey Uso. He's still not good enough to beat a glorified mid-carder consistently. So nobody expects that either. You know what I mean? Now, everybody else below the number one contenders is now borderlining irrelevance. You know, you have people like Drew McIntyre, who is irrelevant at this point. In other words, like Drew McIntyre, in my opinion, is in a Lashley position, like the same position Lashley was about 8 months ago, right? Where if he gets released, like nobody could possibly give a flying fuck. It's like everything that Drew McIntyre can possibly do, he has done, and we don't need to see him do it again, right? He's not good enough to do it again. And that's another element of wrestling that is missing. You know, the replayability, if you will, of wrestlers, right? So you had like someone like The Rock, where it's like you can see The Rock climb his way up to the top multiple times. Same thing with Stone Cold. You could see them climbing their way to the top multiple times and remain interesting. Even Triple H, you know? But nowadays, it's like you have these types of wrestlers where it's like they need to climb up only once, and then that's it. After that, it's like nobody gives a shit about them. This includes Roman Reigns. This includes Cody Rhodes. You know, the reality is that Cody Rhodes can have a long title reign because his title reign is going to be meaningless irrespective of whether it's 1 month long or 10 months long or 10 years long, right? Once the title reign is over, Cody Rhodes is effectively done. His next career step is to become another Randy Orton, you know? Like, but at least Randy Orton had like multiple cracks at the belt. He had multiple ascents to the top. You know, he had like the first one, then he had like the main one against Triple H. You know, then he had some ancillary ones against like Bray Wyatt and shit like that nobody cared about, right? That's like on the tail end of his career. But you understand what I'm getting at? Now it's like people like Drew McIntyre, it's like we've seen them ascend to the mountaintop once, and nobody wants to see that again. So it's a complete waste of time. Same thing with Seth Rollins. Same thing with like, you know, Damian Priest or, you know, Finn Balor, etc. You know, the same thing happens on SmackDown, right? You have a few people like LA Knight. He's also, I hate to say it, he's also a one-timer. You know, if LA Knight becomes world champion once, that's it. You've seen it. You don't need to see it ever again. And there's nothing wrong with that per se. You know, a lot of great wrestlers are one-timers. Like I consider CM Punk to be a one-timer, Jeff Hardy to be a one-timer, Christian Cage, my favorite wrestler of all time, to be a one-timer, right? And some of these are, like Booker T is also effectively a one-timer. He's a one-time WWE champion, you know what I mean? I don't care that he won it in WCW. I'm talking about WWE here, right? He's a one-timer. But the idea is that despite him being a one-timer, he's still awesome. And the second part of this idea is that it's okay to be a one-timer as long as the company has other people that are not one-timers. If the company has other people that are multiple timers, then you're good to go, right? Because you can just have the one-timer get it once in a while. You can have Daniel Bryan get it once in a while, and then Cena can win it again, no problemo. You know what I mean? Same thing. You can have Mankind win it once, right? But then Triple H is going to win it, or Stone Cold's going to win it, or The Undertaker player is going to win it. And that's kind of the idea. The idea is we have to have people that can carry the torch. And right now it's nobody. Now some people are thinking, oh, what about CM Punk? I would go as far as to argue that CM Punk is a one-timer that still hasn't had his title run. You know, yes, he had that legendary title run, which, you know, obviously since then it has been surpassed by multiple wrestlers, but it's still a legendary title run for what it was. But now it's presented like CM Punk hasn't had that, right? Like his entire presentation now is CM Punk is waiting to win the big one, you know? He hasn't won the Rumble. He hasn't main evented WrestleMania. These are all things that he wants to do both in kayfabe and in real life. So it's like, we're just waiting for him to have his one time and then he's going to retire. You know, that's it. Then what? You know, then what? There's nobody in NXT or any recent signings that feel like multiple time champions. You know, they might be multiple time champions the way that Lashley or Drew McIntyre are multiple time champions, meaning that they'll have their one run and then they'll have irrelevant run after irrelevant run. But nobody feels like they're a big deal. And we need some people, at least some people, to feel like big deals. It's not really that difficult to understand. We need people that feel like they are somebody that can carry the roster, that can carry the company forward. We don't have any of those people. And that is inexcusable. The entire roster, both on SmackDown and on Raw, is filled with catastrophic, zero-level jobbers who will never amount to anything and who, quite frankly, even with all their powers combined, like Captain Planet, none of these guys can draw a goddamn dime, motherfucks. There are 0 dimes being drawn by these people. Now, even if the WWE does well, it doesn't matter. It's not because of the wrestlers. It's as simple as that. You could push Otis as the world champion and the needle wouldn't move 1 second. You know what I'm saying? It's not like Gunther is a better wrestler or a bigger draw than Otis. In fact, he's probably a worse draw than Otis because at least Otis has some charisma and Gunther has none. So what I'm getting at here, Cucks, is that everyone sucks balls and nobody could possibly be entertained by anything they're putting towards us. And one of the reasons why wrestling sucks today is the rosters. The rosters are just complete and utter garbage that nobody could possibly look forward to seeing. You know what I mean? I even tuned into MLW. They had like a YouTube show or something, right? And I couldn't get into it because it's like one of the matches is Dijakovic, who is like 9 feet tall, versus Kenta. And I'm like, hey, why do they keep doing this to us? You know? Kenta has no business being in the ring with anyone who's 5'6" or above. You know? But nevertheless, we're going to get to see Kenta all the time because that's how this company rolls, Cucks. You know, the rosters of wrestling in general are poor. Not just WWE, because that's one thing. But the rosters of just wrestling as a concept, I was going to say as a sport, but we all know it's not a sport. Wrestling as a concept, the rosters are completely, like, they're complete garbage. It's like, why would anyone want to watch this? You know, there's absolutely no reason to get behind any wrestler right now. So, you know, maybe Pentagon will be the next big thing. I highly doubt it. But chances are we're going to see just jobberish people after jobberish people. And that's how we're going to roll for the, you know, foreseeable future. So with that being said, take care of yourselves, cucks.